Hi, welcome back to my studio. I'm Wallis. Today we're going to be learning about the palette knife, one of the most underrated and underused tools in painting. I'm going to show you a few different things you can do with a palette knife, some effects that you can create, and just some really useful tips if you want to try painting with a palette knife and using bold texture and color in your paintings. So the palette knife that I use is a Chasun 832, but really I haven't found much difference between manufacturers. The only difference that I find in palette knives are the shape. You can get very angular palette knives, you can get very thin palette knives, very wide spatula-like palette knives. You just have to find the one that works with how you want to paint. Mine is this teardrop shape. It's not a very pointy top. But it's got a nice wide base. It can hold a lot of paint or very little paint. I find it to be very versatile, and that's why I've chosen this one. Now, palette knife maintenance, I try to keep it clean. I try to wipe it between uses so the paint doesn't dry on it, but if it does dry, I find that you can use one of these straight razors and just kind of clean it off using that. Now, the most important maintenance you can do with a palette knife is to keep it straight. Don't store it in a place where it's going to be sitting bent or anything like that. Having a straight palette knife is the most important part, so it can make contact with the canvas or the board in a very predictable manner. Alright, so one of the really fun things to do with a palette knife is mixing color. It's just kind of a neat way to mix, or with a brush you're kind of scrubbing. With a palette knife, it's really kind of a neat thing to marble the paint. And that's what it's called when you see the different colors here in the pile of paint. You see that it's not just one solid color, but it's marbled with different colors, which can be kind of a fun thing to do with a palette knife and putting your color on the painting, is letting it marble. I try not to overmix. You can, of course, just mix the pile until it is one solid color. If that's your prerogative, that's just fine. But I try to leave it marbled. I think it makes a really cool look, especially on flowers or in nature, when it's going to be hard for you to find something that is in fact just one color. So I have here my surface that I'm going to paint on, and I'm not really going to do a painting. I'm just going to show you a few different palette knife techniques, a few different strokes you can do with a palette knife. So the first stroke is just a very, very thin line. So on your paint, you don't want to get very much. Just get a tiny little bit of paint on there. And one really cool thing that you can do with a palette knife is just make contact with that surface and just watch that very thin line appear. Now, if you have problems drawing straight lines, this might help you. The thickness of line depends on the amount of paint you get on your palette knife. But you can see I'm not even having to return much to the palette to draw with it. Another really great thing about palette knives is the ability to put a line in and then just kind of drag it down. You take that paint and it can just drag down, which can vary your lines, which is always a good thing to do. Whenever you're painting and you're using lines throughout your painting, you want to vary those lines. You don't want them all to be exactly straight, or it's going to look like a robotic painting. Especially if you're painting a rustic old house or something like that. You want to let some different colors, some different lines come in to your painting. So that's kind of how you use it as a straight line. Don't be afraid to get your other hand in there and just make sure that line is exactly where you want it before you make contact. This can be really useful too. If you use thick paint, you can get a nice big roll of paint on that knife, and say you want to do some fence posts. And what's really cool is then you get just a thin amount of paint and you can even do your barbed wire with the knife. So it's kind of a fun little thing to play with the knife. You don't always have to use a tiny little brush to get detail. Having that super straight flat edge on a knife can really be beneficial. So one of the other functions that I use a knife for is to apply an impressionistic type feel. So to illustrate this, I want to have some sort of bush that I'm going to be painting. So pretty simple concept here. I'm just throwing in my block-in colors really quick, abstractly on this little bush. I don't want to spend a lot of time because that's not the point of this video. But there's kind of the block-in of a bush. Now, a fun way to use your knife, and the key to this, is actually to come in with some thicker paint with a brush first. Otherwise, if you've primed your canvas and that paint is too thin underneath, it will be kind of slippery with the knife. So I want to make sure that I've got some pretty thick paint. So you can see I'm taking the paint without any thinner and applying it. And that's going to give the knife something to let the paint grab onto. So if I'm mixing with my knife here, I'm going to let the colors marble a little bit. And then I can come in and and the touch is so light. You want to barely make contact with that, with your painting surface. But you can see that the knife is just going to leave just a little bit of paint to drag off. Then in my bush I get a little bit lighter and I start to come over this way. And then I keep getting just a little bit lighter. As I move towards the center, or sorry, excuse me, I move towards the source of light. Letting some of this dark come up in here to be accents that we're going to paint over the top of later. Then eventually I'm ready to start to paint the lighter side of this bush. Again, letting the knife marble that paint so it's not just one solid color. Then you can come in and drag some of that lighter stuff throughout the bush so it doesn't end up looking just like a ball. You can see you can even pull some of these edges up and give it that feathered appearance, which Works well to blend it into its surroundings. And you can pull paint from another part of your painting and put it somewhere else with a knife if you want. It's a very versatile tool. You can come in with accents. And you can see the bushes starting to appear. Now another little stroke I like to use with the knife fairly often is like a sideways swipe. Especially for foregrounds, stuff like that. It's really kind of a neat shape to bring something into. But now you can see that bush is just kind of grown up there out of the ground. It's given it a lot of varied tone, a lot of varied texture, and really has made it kind of interesting to look at. You can see the marbling here has allowed some vibrant pink to live inside what, when you back up, is a very green bush. So one of the most difficult things to do while painting is when your painting gets too dark, being able to lighten it up appropriately can be a very difficult thing. Just for time's sake, I'm just drawing in an apple here with a brush. But you can see that I've got a green background and it is freshly applied. And so what I want to do is create a red apple on top of this green with just a palette knife. You can see that I can come in and work that paint over. This is kind of the darker area of the apple. And then using my color wheel, I'm just going to start to lighten some spots on the apple. So this is where you use the color wheel as your guide rather than using white to lighten and the complement to darken. As you can see, that apple, even when it's got that green background, with this thick paint I can apply with the palette knife, is starting to take a more vibrant tone. I'm not going to worry too much about the detail of my apple, but I am going to use my knife to just work some of this lighter tone consistently throughout the apple. And you can just mix it right on the painting, just like you would in the palette. gives it kind of a cool, varied look. If you go too far, you can always just bring in some of that dark color again and just keep working it together back and forth with the knife. Until you get that rounded shape of an apple to appear. Now where you stop is up to you, but it's always kind of fun to just come in at this point and you can start to highlight some things. And you can use as much paint as you want with a knife, and you can build up that texture as much as you want to. And what's really fun about a knife is the amount of vibrant, bright color you can get into your painting. And you can just keep building up that texture as much as you want to or as little as you want to, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And that's kind of the fun thing about a knife, is you can build that texture up. So you can see, if I were to take the knife and scrape with it, how much paint is actually on there. Quite a bit of paint. Especially right here. See all that paint? So I would encourage, before you try a large piece, to just take, what I did was take a little 5x7 and just practice some of the techniques of using a knife, which isn't just a tool for getting rid of paint, even though it's very good for that too. You can see I'm scraping this down to almost gone with a knife. But it's also a wonderful tool to paint with. When you're painting with a knife, you can take colors that you can dream up, and you can just do anything with them. Dragon anywhere you want to. So if you like to paint with abstract, a knife can be just a wonderful tool to just create design. See that marbling effect right there? You can do it right on the canvas. So I encourage you to play with your palette knife. It can be a really fun tool. It might open up doors creatively that you have never experienced before. Grab yourself a little board or a little canvas and just have fun with it. I would love to see anything you try after watching this video. I would love for you to post any pictures of some of the things that you have done with a knife, and especially I would love to hear your questions. If you've seen me do something on here and you're just not quite able to do it, please let me know, comment, and I will see if I can answer your questions and help you. If you would like to see me paint a landscape using a palette knife, join me for the conclusion of my Teton video.